Welcome to the Home of Everything Frederick at 401 North Market Street. I'm Danny Gurry from Good Morning Frederick, though I know it's not morning. This is an odd time, I know, for me to be on. I am excited to bring you each week on Monday from now through mid-October all of the nominees for the Board of Education of Frederick County candidates who decide to return the calls. Well, the first one did, and I'm excited to have Colt Black with me, who is up for nomination. Now, you guys probably remember you voted in the primary. How many total candidates were there in the primary?
There was
8 or 10?
No, it was actually more around 14.
14. Okay,
yes.
So we took the 14 candidates, whittled them down to 6, right?
Yes.
And now there will be 3.
That is correct. 3 that will be seated to the board.
3 will be seated to the board. And one thing I didn't realize is that every other year it's 3 and then or every other election cycle, it's 3 and then 4, right?
Correct.
3 and then 4. Okay, so you got a 50% chance, maybe. I'd like those odds, actually, but so I've gotten a bunch of questions from our viewers.
Sure.
But first, I'd love to just start out and find out a little bit about you and your desire to be seated on the Board of Education.
Well, thank you for having me here. I think it's an excellent opportunity to be able to address your viewers. So my name's Colt Black. Of course, I'm a licensed funeral director. So I've been a licensed funeral director here in the state of Maryland since right around 2010.
Okay.
So I own my own business, Black's Funeral Home, and I own the Acacia Society, which is an online-based cremation service providership. I'm also involved in emergency medical services. I actually own Blue Star EMS, which is a private transport EMS company based out of Pennsylvania.
Wow, all right.
Yes.
So you are part of the community, full stop, really.
Indeed.
Yes.
So as far as my desire to be on the Board of Education, I ran last cycle for U.S. Congress. In addition to that, I also ran for the Republican Central Committee of Frederick County. I did not win my congressional race, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here at the second.
Right.
But I did win my seat with the Republican Central Committee. I served as their treasurer up until the point where I became a Board of Education candidate, at which point I had to give that seat up. I am still an elected member of the Republican Central Committee. And, you know, my desire is really just to serve the community. Because at the end of the day, I have 3 kids, all of whom go to between Catoctin and Thurmont Middle School. I'm a product of Frederick County Public Schools. I attended Sebillsville Elementary, and then from there, Thurmont Middle and Catoctin High. I graduated in 2006. So, you know, from my time in FCPS, now with my children in FCPS, I've seen a lot of both negative as well as positive changes within the school system, and you know, I'm looking to try to help influence some of those negative decisions back to the positive.
Yeah, look, and I mean, I think that's kind of the most important thing, right? There are some vast differences from when even I attended school here in Frederick County, and some things I think we can control the change.
Sure.
Others we can't, but
Exactly.
some I think we can. All right, so what do you feel makes you qualified as a Board of Education member?
That's a great question. I mean, I think really one of the first things to say is I look at the Board of Education just like any other business that I would run, right? Our product is educating students, and if you're not having excellent outcomes from that, something is wrong, right? So I look at it both from the fiscal standpoint, how can we best maximize the dollars? Do we have the right people in place? Are we providing the right services? And at the end of the day, is each child getting an excellent education?
Okay.
And therefore, being in that business mindset, I think makes me very well qualified to be on the Board of Education.
Yeah, okay, so the big question then is how? How do we do those things? So I guess really the fiscal part.
Sure.
What ideas do you have already before going in that you feel you could implement immediately to help, because there was a budget shortfall.
Sure.
And because of that, classroom sizes were raised. I believe that there was an issue with the bus drivers, and that's we kind of have this whole domino effect with a budget shortfall at over $900 million in Frederick County. And we have tons of new homes that we were told that a portion of all of those new homes built goes into the budget.
Sure.
So what What are your ideas on the budget?
Well, I mean, I think one of the very first things that needs done is a true audit of the budget, because I would challenge anybody watching to actually go and look at FCPS's budget. I want you to look and actually see what the money's being spent on, because it's not actually broken down in a way that is easy to understand and actually digest. So quite frankly, to really get to the crux of it, a top-down audit would be needed first and foremost. Second to that, we can look at already the various salary ranges here in Frederick County between your staffers in the schools all the way up through administration. What we have is a top-heavy system here in Frederick County. Those folks that are in the administration building here in Frederick are not directly working with students, and I think that there could definitely be some cuts within the administrative offices here in Frederick to redirect those funds to the teachers, other educators, and other paraprofessionals in the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why everybody's not cheering for that. Like, that, I think, is the one common sense thing, and I would love for that budget to be posted. Why, you know, really transparency.
Sure.
And like you say, if it's so vague and things are not clearly defined as here's where the money's coming in and here is where it's assigned to go out, or this is what it's impacting, that's an issue.
It is.
Very ambiguous. We don't like that. We don't like that. All right, you talked a little bit about the teachers. You know, we've got teachers every year. You see the wish list, the Amazon wish list. I'm getting ready to decorate my room, or I'm a new teacher. I need books. I need supplies. How can we fix that?
I mean, I think that's a pretty easy fix, right? I mean, that's the wish list of teachers has been something that's been going on since I was in school. I don't know if they had that type of thing when you were in school, but I can remember.
They hardly had computers when I was in school.
But going all the way back to elementary school, I can remember those various wish lists. You know, you would go in, you know, Walmart, Kmart, wherever it was, and you had the little sheet, the supplies, and then on top of it, the teacher would have a wish list, right?
Yeah.
So they were asking parents to bring all these things in, and I think there's nothing wrong to a point with asking people to participate. However, I think it gets to a point where some of these things are so essential to everyday activities in the school that I question, what are we spending our money on? So I would look to try to redirect funding to make sure that those immediate basic needs are being met. And if that means we have to take some off the top of administration in downtown, I think we can do that.
I mean, look, every teacher should start out with, here's your box of supplies. You know, if you use them all the first day, that's on you. But here's what you get, and it should be enough for everybody, for sure. Somebody asked on a post that I made a stance on teacher planning and prep time. I don't know, apparently this is an issue. I don't know, a middle school, every time I turn around, hey, how are you? It's all right, it's all good, it's all good. Every time we turned around, that a teacher seemed to be on a planning time, but that could have been inaccurate. So do you know that this is an issue?
I mean, I've not necessarily heard that from any teachers that I've spoken with as far as, you know, not having enough time to plan. Or if, you know, on the other side is somebody getting more than another. I really haven't heard that, so I can't really comment intelligently on that, but I would certainly say from the very get-go, if they don't have enough time to plan, we certainly need to be doing something about that. And I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So if there's any teachers out there that like to talk to me, please feel free to contact me.
And we encourage you to, you can ask your questions. I got my husband kind of monitoring, especially YouTube and everything.
The group didn't type this right.
Okay, okay. So we're only on YouTube right now?
LinkedIn, your personal.
Okay, so we are, okay. That's Everything Frederick and More, I think, that last one. The F. Yeah, I don't know what's happened today with the stream, but we're on three. We're on the big ones. Yeah, we're on the big ones. Okay, teacher shortage. What are your initial thoughts on why we can't recruit teachers into Frederick County?
Well, I mean, I would say that there's several reasons for that, right? I mean, pay obviously is a big one. I keep hearing from a lot of teachers and other folks in the educational setting that, you know, they can go to a neighboring county and make more money. And again, that kind of goes back to that top-heavy system that we have. We have folks in the central office making 6 figures a year, and our teachers who's actually affecting the students of tomorrow, you know, our future doctors, our future lawyers. they're really not being fairly compensated.
Yeah.
So I think that there can definitely be something done with teacher pay. Second to that would obviously be work environment. We'll use Brunswick High School for an example. When you are a teacher who is walking through standing water in the hallways, mold in the ceilings, mold in the walls.
I mean, that is outrageous.
Decrepit conditions. Would you want to come to work in a place like that?
No,
so I think it also comes down to promoting an atmosphere that people want to be a part of, that people can feel like they're a winning part of the team. And that's one of the things that I really want to bring to the Board of Education, to create an environment where all the staff really feels proud of what they're doing and encouraged by what they see.
Yeah, and every time we hear about the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, and it always seems to be 5 to 10 years down. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. What can we do? I mean, Brunswick, that is just absolutely abhorrent for those people, the kids and the teachers, to be in that environment every day.
Sure.
How can we impact moving up those sorts of things where it's not 20, 30 years in between trying to get these improvements?
Well, I mean, I think this really comes down to prioritizing, right? We have a tendency here in the county and certain areas that certain schools gets more attention than others. You know, some of your older schools, Catoctin, Brunswick, Middletown, those more rural areas does not seem to get the attention that some of your city schools, Urbana, you know, Oakdale, and there's definitely some inequity there. So I think that we need to really work on making sure that we're meeting all the students and all the staff's needs by ensuring that the upgrades to the buildings is being done in a timely manner, and it doesn't necessarily always work in the Board of Education's schedule.
Yeah.
You know, I think that sometimes you have to, you know, the old saying in business is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Government's great at doing that.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes redirecting of money, you know, budgets doesn't necessarily have to be set in stone when it comes to some of these, you know, emergent improvements in the schools, especially with things that's affecting people's health.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about students.
Sure.
The MCAP, which is the tested curriculum each year. A parent asked a comparison of the achievement versus 3 to 4 years ago, and where you stand on canned scripted curriculum that seems to cost a lot of money versus teacher autonomy. That we don't seem to trust our teachers anymore to the curriculum. They have to, you know, and they stress about it. It's
right.
You can see it every year on social media about teachers like frantic about getting this stuff in for the tests.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the tests?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of teacher autonomy when it comes to knowing their classroom, knowing their classroom's interest, their strengths, their weaknesses. Teaching to a test is never good.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're doing with these standardized tests. I don't believe that a standardized test truly determines an individual student's achievement whatsoever.
Yeah.
Some people just are not good test takers.
Oh, yeah.
Some tests
Yeah.
are made that it is actually a grade level above of where you should be, and it actually shows the students are weaker.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is, I would love to get away from standardized tests. Unfortunately, so much funding is tied to standardized testing. So the question then becomes, what can we do to balance that? I think that working with our teachers and other educational professionals, we can strike that balance, and with the right members of the board, such as myself, I believe we can definitely do that.
Yeah. It's going to take, I think, people who are willing to kind of push back a little bit against it and say, hey, look, there's got to be something to balance that
Absolutely.
other side. And because, again, I believe that autonomous teachers are happy teachers.
Indeed.
Because they're not being drilled down upon so hard.
Micromanagement is never good.
No, never good in business or
Indeed.
here. Student behavior issues. This was a big one. There were so many comments about, and you know, I haven't experienced this with my kids who graduated in 2021 and 2023. The bad kids, and I'm sorry to use that terminology, disruptive kids seem to get a lot of attention,
right.
which actually removes attention or teachers' eye from the kids who may need the help, or really it's the middle of the road kids that kind of get lost all the time, right?
Sure.
Not the high achievers, not the ones that are disciplinary issues. What are your thoughts on what our schools can do to help administration combat this cycle, because those kids don't ever seem to really be removed from the situation entirely?
Right. I mean, and I think that's probably one of the most difficult things. You know, with public education, the law says that you have to educate every student.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, though, that many students doesn't want to be in school.
Yeah,
right?
True.
And when you have these behavioral problems, I think it has to get to a point where the disciplinary is progressive enough to where we actually start expelling more students, to be quite frank. There are programs through Department of Health, Mental Hygiene, and other private agencies that we could turn those families on to get the help that they need, because the school system is not behavioral health.
Right.
It's just like a business. When you take a business and try to make it do too many things, you lose your focus on the main thing that you're supposed to be doing, and you start to fail.
Yeah.
That is exactly where we are with the school system, and I think that the progressive disciplinary policies needs to be adhered to. I think that at the same time, maybe some additional punishments for students would be a good thing. Whether that's, some additional volunteering around the school through in-school suspension or something like that. Putting these kids to work, and if they're not going to be a participatory part of the school community, maybe remote learning for those kids if they're going to stay in the public school system, so they're not causing a disruption in the classroom. And if that doesn't work, then ultimately expulsion needs to happen, because it's actually a crime to disrupt school operations. And the fact of the matter is, these students aren't being charged, so if they're not going to be charged with a crime, we at least need to remove them from the situation so that other kids can learn.
Yeah, okay. Obviously in the news in the last year or two, especially here in Frederick, is special education, and what you feel you can do to impact positively that whole program that I believe should have the light shined on it and needs a kind of full, cleanup.
Sure.
But what do you think that you can do for that?
Well, I think one of the very first things we need to do is take an assessment as to our community partners and resources around. We live in a very resource-rich area. Organizations and institutions like Kennedy Krieger and some of these other agencies that's in the area, we need to be able to take full inventory of what we actually have available to aid families here, and be able to connect them with those resources, even if that doesn't mean that the child directly goes to FCPS. I think that we can utilize those community partners to better our special education system. Additionally, I would also, as a Board of Education member, be looking to find additional funding. There's various grants and things like that through the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, as well as State Department of Education, that may or may not be being applied for. There's usually somebody in central office within all county agencies that's supposed to be applying for these things. So one of the questions that needs answered, what is being applied for as far as this grant money, what is not being applied for, and if it's not being applied for, why, and how do we get into tapping into that resource?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I've heard some horror stories about the special education, and it shouldn't be that way. And again, I think it kind of goes down to the staffing levels, what you're doing there, and their ability to deal with what they're being dealt.
Indeed.
And so, yeah, having more support there, I think will be good. I think you've answered a couple of these about the buildings and the budget cuts. And accountability to the taxpayer. And you really came up with the budget shortfall. Transportation is another big issue here in the county. Actually, I just met somebody who was a bus driver yesterday who told me that 30 bus drivers there are 30 routes in Frederick County right now that are not being bused. How is it, first of all, a family accommodating that? And I only remember once or twice with my kids where I'd get an email saying, sorry, there's no bus driver tomorrow. Right. How is a family supposed to deal with that, and what can we do for our bus drivers here?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. So, I mean, Up until this past year, 2 of my children went to what was Sevillersville Elementary, which is now the Environmental Charter School. And of course, FCPS does not provide transportation to the charter schools either. But yet, at my kids' then charter school, there was 4 or 5 FCPS buses parked there that would leave every morning and go pick students up for Thurmont. So interestingly enough, the students, when they shut down Sevillersville School, many of the students stayed for the environmental, but yet those kids who's directly in the community wasn't provided transportation. So it's a huge problem. I think maybe one of the things, if we're not able to secure the bus drivers, if we are not able to, fill those seats on the bus with a qualified CDL licensed driver, perhaps we need to go looking at privatization of transportation. Is that necessarily what people want to hear? No, but at the same time, it would cut down on the cost of buses if you were to privatize, because somebody else is paying for maintenance and repairs as well as the buying of the bus, and they're also paying the benefits of the employee. Many jurisdictions around Frederick County, especially over in Pennsylvania, contract their buses. I think that is probably the way to go. It seems like many times, again, going back to what schools are supposed to be there to do, we're not in the transportation business.
Great.
Do we try to do it? Yes. How are we doing with it at this point?
Right.
Not well.
Yeah.
So if we're not doing well with it, we need to look to engage somewhere else. And I believe that a potential privatization, or at least a partial privatization of transportation, is what needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would think, when I was growing up here, there were I don't think there were 44,000 students, right? And so as the needs of transportation have grown, I don't believe that, like you say, FCPS isn't in the business of transportation. And this woman was telling me there are managers and mechanics driving the buses on these routes.
Right.
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with it. They're all licensed to do
Correct.
so. So there, no shade on them stepping up.
Sure,
but should they?
and thank goodness for them.
Yeah,
Right.
Thank goodness for them, because, and I do even think that the 1.25 miles, which I think it is now, I think that's kind of far for a 6th grader to walk. And we had that issue at Monocacy Middle School.
Sure.
The kids furthest in our neighborhood, it was 30 minutes and bad weather and snow-covered sidewalks, and then you just have a lot of these other issues that may be able to be taken care of with different solutions.
Indeed.
And I do think we need to be open to different solutions. Everybody. You can't just say no because it might displace a couple people when you look at the ultimate impact that it could have by doing something like that, or coming up with some creative ideas and ways to solve these issues.
Indeed.
Yeah. I think this was an issue maybe last year, the year before, about censorship of books in the libraries, removing certain books that I grew up reading. I don't know why they were being removed, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, and thank you for the question. That's actually and both an amusing question as well as a very volatile question,
Yeah.
right? So first and foremost, I'm a First Amendment absolutist. I believe that people should be able to read whatever in the heck they want to read. I don't care what it is. That's your business as a free citizen of the United States. However,
You're right.
I believe with age appropriateness.
Yeah.
Public schools, it's one thing for a parent to go buy a child a book. It's one thing for the child to go to the bookstore with the parent's permission and buy a book. I think it's a difference when the taxpayer is paying for certain items to be in schools. Many of these books, now I know some of the literary classics that a lot of people point to, I'm not looking to see those out of the schools, because quite frankly, I think that things that have academic value, historical value, give social context to various things, I think that those type of things needs to stay in school. And it's a slippery slope, because so many times everybody's opinion on what's offensive is different, right? I think it really comes down to, is the book, is it glorifying or glamorizing violence? Is it glorifying or glamorizing sexual exploitation? If it comes into either one of those categories, those type of books does not belong in school, unless, again, it has some type of scholastic value to it outside of just pure entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, you almost want to see like a restricted area where if the parents come in and want your kids to be able to read those books, then good on them.
Right.
But the public library. We have a great public library system
We do
here in
have a
Frederick
great public
County, so you can
library,
take
and
your kids there to get whatever books you want to get them.
Another government-funded entity
Right.
with books for your children to read.
Right,
That's
right.
correct.
This was an interesting question, and I don't even know if the Board of Ed would have any control over this, but it is kind of odd that our schools in neighboring counties all start at a different time, have different numbers of days off throughout the month or the year. Obviously, knowing that everybody completes what they need to, different holiday breaks. Why isn't it consistent? Do you know?
That's an interesting question as well. So I mean, one of the things that used to be big here in Frederick County was Fair Day.
Yeah.
All the students just used to get off for the Frederick Fair, and I think because we are such an agrarian community, I think that we definitely need to reinstate Fair Day. I think that that's a very important day. Even if you don't take your kids to the fair, so what? It's a great day to have off.
Yeah.
But kind of getting back to that, that's one of those days that not all the other counties had off, right?
Right.
So I think what it really comes down to is taking a census and the pulse of the current student population. We have various religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds that we have to take into consideration when you choose for people to be off school, days to be off school. You have to look at how many students is really going to miss out of educational instructional time for those things versus the general other populace of the students that will not. So why is there inconsistencies? I think that it really just comes down to they are trying, there is basically a calendar committee. I don't know if I got the right name for that.
I would never ever want to be on that. That committee never makes anyone happy.
No,
ever.
But I mean, they try,
I know,
right?
they do.
So
they do.
I think really what would be the idealistic situation, I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves is how early the kids start at school.
Yes.
To me, as an adult, waking up with your kids at 5 o'clock in the morning to be sure that they're all showered and on the bus and all that good stuff in time. And by the way, when they go to school, when you talk to your kids and they're like, yeah, most of the people slept through first and second period, it's like, that's not really instructional time, is it? So I think that the Board of Education does have control over that, and the inconsistency is essentially due to, well, we don't have the same calendar committees as everyone else. Right. But I think that that's definitely something that we can take a look at, and it obviously would be year to year and obviously examining your student populace and who's in school.
And look, I think the thing is, there is a calendar committee,
Sure.
right, that you can volunteer for, you can have your input, and you can realize all the different people that want their days and want their things, including the teachers and the unions and everybody else who needs certain number of days, so that's where you can have that, you can be invested in that. You talked about how you're already currently invested with your children in the system and being a product of the system as well, which is good, because I think a lot of parents want to make sure that people on the board actually understand the impact of the decisions they're making, right?
Yes, incredibly important.
Yeah. Before running for Board of Education, this was an interesting question. Did you attend any meetings, Board of Ed meetings or any of that?
I did make it to several meetings, never made it inside due to some health situations with my wife. And parking's obviously always a pain. So, but yes, I have made it to either virtual or in person. So I have made it there. And obviously the real disappointment with the FCPS meetings is the limitations on people to speak.
Yes.
I think that anybody who wishes to speak at an FCPS meeting, as long as you are a member of this community, you should have a voice, and the people that's sitting on the dais at the school board should hear you.
Yes.
And you should not have to sign up in advance. You should not, it should be very easy to come in and make public comment, because you don't generally have people that's not parents coming in there and make comment. These are folks that has a stake in the system, and I think it's very important for them to be heard. And I certainly, as your next school board member, would love to see everybody have that ability to come in and speak.
I love that. I actually want to add that as a question, because that is a great point. I've been to several meetings where you've planned, you get your people together, you get your commentary together, and then they're like, oh, time's up, gotta go. It's like, that's ridiculous.
It is.
When first of all, like you say, not very convenient to go to a meeting where you have to park and get there and all of that. So if we've taken our time to calm down because we're passionate about whatever it is.
Indeed.
whether they agree with it or not, we should have, it should be 70-30. 70 to the people there wanting to speak versus 30% of whatever is
Indeed.
happening on
No,
that day.
absolutely.
I agree. That's great. All right. And I think we touched on this just a little.
Sure.
I don't know if we did this actually on the stream or we were just talking about before. I think we were talking about before, but sports fees.
Sure.
Athletes, a lot of these kids, athletics is a huge part of growing up. It's a great way to establish a tie and a loyalty to the school. Some kids, it's just great to have that family. How in the world are these families jumping from $95, which was, I believe, last year's school sports fees, to over $200? First part of the question. Okay. I don't even know how schools or families are going to do that. But also attending sports. Now they have shifted everything to online. You can't even pay cash going in. And the fees of admission to a game, which is now dissuading, again, those families that can't even afford the fees for their child to play. That vicious cycle of the disparity between some of our schools that have 1,000 people attend their every sporting event,
right,
down to schools who have 12 people that attend a sporting event, that's really terrible.
It is. It certainly is. Now, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe the online purchase is just for varsity games, right? You can still go JV in person and purchase tickets, but it's cashless.
Why?
That's a great question that I actually have not gotten the answer to. But let's go back to the sports fees. First and foremost, I think it's ridiculous if you as a parent have a child in sports and you're going to be asked to fundraise to buy equipment, for transportation, whatever it is, and yet you're going to be asked to pay a fee. It should be an either and or. Because I know when I was growing up, sometimes fundraising is not always that fun, and sometimes it's a pain in the rear. So if a family says, hey, you know what, we want to put the money in and skip fundraising, I'm fine with that. But if you're going to fundraise, then there should not be any type of fee for your student because you're doing the work and participating in another way to raise that money. So that would be one of the rule changes that I would look to implement to say, okay, you're either going to pay or you're going to fundraise. And if you're going to fundraise, then that's between you and the athletics program to make sure that that fee's paid, number one. As far as the cost, I would be curious to see if there was an insurance increase with the sports. That very well could be a potential issue.
Fair enough.
Something that is definitely a problem here in Frederick County that a lot of people's not paying attention to, but it's a big problem with the NFL, so much so that there's a number of articles, if you go out and research it, is the artificial turf fields. They're actually causing more permanent sports injuries in students and in the NFL than natural turf. So we actually have a budgetary line item here in Frederick County to replace all existing natural turf with artificial turf. And yes, it's lower maintenance, but those type of turf fields are actually causing more permanent debilitating injuries to individuals playing sports. And if your son or your daughter is playing sports and you're trying to get a scholarship, I don't think that we want to be in the situation where we're putting them in an increased danger to injure themselves and potentially lose out on that scholarship. And I would be curious to see if maybe some of the insurance, if there is an increase in insurance, is due to artificial turf fields, because I believe there might be some type of concurrence there.
Interesting. Okay, and then, in talking about the disparity of, especially when it comes to sporting events and budgets that the athletic directors have access to and things like that, do you have any thoughts on what you may be able to implement to kind of help literally even the playing field?
Well, I think that comes down to, the Board of Education has to provide each of the sporting programs with so much money. And what I think that could really be the simple thing across the board is to examine how many programs we have, how many there are to fund, and just basically set a line item budget number, and that's it. Everything else from there, if they're going to do athletic boosters and fundraise, then that's where the money comes from. Otherwise, you work with what you have, because we're putting some schools in the position to work with a very small budget when it comes to their athletic program, where other schools have, $100,000 in the coffers. And that's not necessarily from fundraising, and that's not okay.
Yeah, no, definitely not okay. Last one is school safety. It's an unfortunate topic that we have to talk about, but considering even the news recently.
Sure.
I know a lot of the schools over the past several years have put in certain systems in place with the double lock safety thing at the front doors. Do you have any other, one of the parents asked, is there any budget for any additional safety measures that may be put in place?
Well, that's a great question, and that's actually something, being involved in public safety, that I take a very great interest in. And one of the very first things that I would like to do as a member of the Board of Education, there's a program called Operation School Shield, and it is completely free to any school system in the United States to get a free safety assessment and actually go through and provide additional training to staff, teachers, administrators, and things of that nature. And they give you a top-down review of what you're doing well in the schools, what you can improve, and so on and so forth. And I think that bringing in an organization like Operation School Shield to be able to work with our administrators, work with our teachers, and be able to give the Board of Education an accurate assessment of where do we stand at level of preparedness and readiness for everything. And it's not just for active shooters, it's for fires, bomb threats, natural disasters, you name it. It is a wide plethora of safety issues that they address, and that would be one of the very first things that I would look to do. And then working from that safety group's priorities that they put together for the board, I would look to prioritize spending in accordance with that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, it'd be nice to know, right?
Certainly.
You have to have some sort of starting point to understand what needs to be improved and where money should be spent.
Sure.
How do you feel, and will the Board of Education push as equally the trade schools, apprenticeships, military careers as college?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting and near and dear to my heart question. Going back as a 90s kid, it was always, if you don't go to college, you're not going to amount to anything. I think that mantra is still being pushed somewhat in the public school system.
Yeah.
Kids who wants to do the technology completer instead of doing a foreign language and going through the college completer side of things, I think there is still a little bit of disparity put onto them. But yet, interestingly enough, when you look at the numbers at the end of the day, when somebody comes out of college with thousands and thousands in student debt, and you have somebody who went to a trade program in high school and they're making the same money, I sit here and go, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So expanding those programs and ensuring that we are making partnerships with various businesses here in the community, there is no question in my mind that those programs are not only needed, but they need to be expanded, and people needs to be encouraged, because not everybody is college bound, and people needs to know that is okay.
Absolutely. Not is it okay, it's needed. My goodness, the shortage we have in the trades right now.
Indeed.
And just all of it. And I do think CTC is an amazing program. I wish they had that dual enrollment when I was in high school, and my son even missed out on it as well. But I think that that's a great opportunity for those kids who do need a degree or want a degree. But for those who don't, there should be no saying no to them. There should be a space for every kid who wants to learn.
And our expansion of the Career and Technology program, a lot of people points to our campus here over by FCC with the Career and Technology Center. But many of especially the older schools here in the county, Catoctin's a perfect example of this, they used to have an automotive program. They have the bays there. They have the space. We have areas and other schools here in the county that can be revitalized, that was already in place for doing those type of career-based, technology-based skills.
Yeah.
And I believe that we can do it at a very much more affordable cost than just expanding the Career and Technology Center by utilizing existing spaces.
Well, and TJ had the same thing. I remember the auto mechanics, you could bring your car in there and get an oil change and all that. They used to have the hair cutting girls actually at the schools. They didn't have to go to CTC. I don't even think CTC was built when I was in those schools though, but yeah, I agree. And I do think FCPS could look harder at public-private partnerships. I do think that is one area that there are, especially Frederick County. We have so many businesses, I think, who would be very willing to have apprentices and work with people who are interested in those, because it would be really great to find out at 16, 17 years old that you really love something or you really don't love something before you commit further into it. But I would love to see that too.
And then it also creates a situation through those community private partnerships with FCPS to actually find career placement for a lot of these kids coming out of school, so that, you know what, they've gained the skills, now they have a job as soon as they come out of school, and they are prepared for the real world.
Absolutely, which builds a better community here in Frederick County, which is what we want. All right, I think I've put you through the ringer, but I am going to give you your 5 minutes to really just let the viewers know about you, why they should vote for you on November 5th.
Right,
and
November 5th.
Yeah, we're going to let you have the floor.
Well, thank you. I mean, really, at the end of the day, the decision on who you vote for the Board of Education is a binary choice. Do you want someone who is going to respect your rights as a parent? Do you want somebody that's going to respect your rights as a taxpayer? Because at the end of the day, even if you don't have children in Frederick County Public Schools, your property taxes is influenced by what the school board spends. And while the school board is not a taxing entity, meaning we cannot set tax rates, if you look at Frederick County's budget, the school board is roughly half. So, do you want somebody that's going to be fiscally responsible, or would you like your property taxes to increase? So, very short and sweet. I don't want to raise your kids, and I don't want to raise your taxes. At the end of the day, everything else is subpar to that, because through fiscal responsibility comes increase in opportunities for our students here in the schools, and through parental engagement and transparency comes the building of partnerships that strengthens our community.
Well, there you go. Where should people go if they want to find out more, or pass along your information to somebody?
Excellent. Yes. So my website is Colt, just simply my name, Colt, C-O-L-T, black.com, and we're also on Facebook as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, reach out if you have any additional questions for Colt directly. Appreciate your time for coming in today. Really do.
Thank you very much.
I think it's very important, and like Colt said, even if you don't have students in FCPS, this does affect you, and you're going to want to know to put the right people on the school board this year. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.